So we're going back to parenting and how it affects childhood experiences, and we're going to kind of roll from there. So the Ghosts in the Nursery article focuses on how your past experiences as a child affect your parenting and your children in the future. There was one particular story that kind of stuck out to me. It was about Mary. In this case, I don't know if that's her real name. Not this Mary. But it was about a girl named Mary who was only 5.5 months old. Her mom was detached, and the child was just like not attaching to the mom either. And the mom just wanted to give up this child for adoption. And that's why she came in to seek help. So they did this whole evaluation on the mom, and the mom turned out to actually have a lot of psychological issues herself. She was very depressed. They found that she was very depressed. And it also
postpartum depression.
So they actually went into the mother's side of the story. So the mom herself was an abandoned child. So her mother suffered from postpartum psychosis shortly after her birth. She attempted suicide, which actually Mary's mom did as well. And then she spent nearly all of her life in a hospital and was barely known to her children. The mom of the girl was cared for by her aunt, and when the aunt could no longer care for her, she was shifted to the house of the maternal grandmother, where she received grudging care from the burdened, impoverished old woman. So the father was in and out of the family picture. They lived in poverty, and there was just a lot going on to this child didn't really have family or parents. And so she then met and married her husband, who also came from poverty and family disorders. They wanted something better for their life, basically. So they went through cycles of working and establishing like their careers. And then, they decided, they want to have a child. And so, but then Mary's mom actually cheated on the father. She had a brief affair. And her guilt over affair and the doubts of who the father is of this child,
it's like Santa Barbara,
became like an obsessive theme for her. And it was something that, like, I guess, caused her depression. Basically, that's why she kind of wanted to give up this child. And so basically her own experience transferred to her parenting style, which was the abandoning parent.
Right. Well, that's usually the case. I think we often carry all our childhood trauma into adulthood, and it always shows up in various forms in our various relationships, either in your friendships, in your marriages, in your parenting.
Yeah.
You just carry, and also, they say children oftentimes what they see is what they're going to do.
Right.
They're not going to listen to what you're saying. They're going to replicate what you're doing. So if a child is constantly exposed to trauma, they don't know anything about it. They don't know anything else. They don't know any better. So they're going to carry that trauma, and then they're going to traumatize their child, and it's just going to continue unless they seek help and they understand that this is a problem for them now, and they need some sort of help and they need some sort of guidance to break a cycle, because it is a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I guess I feel like there are, a lot of people who, when they go to through these traumatic experiences, they want something different for their kids.
Right.
So I don't think this is for everybody. I think, yes, it does to a certain extent. And I guess this goes back to how people handle stress and how they handle negativity. And I know a lot of people who went through difficult situations growing up, and they're amazing parents because they don't want that to repeat itself.
Difficult situations, not traumatic situations. Difficult situation, like just being, let's say, in a state of poverty. So you're growing up in a house, and it's hard to make ends meet, but your parents are still there, and you're still go to school and doing all these things. So that's an issue, but it's not a trauma, because poverty is something that you have an ability to get out. Not everybody gets out of poverty, of course, but you have that ability.
Yeah.
If, let's say, somebody beats you, only will you have the ability to get out of that when you're older? But if they're beating you and beating you and beating you and beating you throughout your childhood, that's trauma.
Yeah.
That's something that you need a lot of help with later on, because then that becomes your norm. Being in a poverty situation is, you understand that that's not the norm. But when you're getting traumatized, you start to adapt that as the norm. So I hit you, you hit them, they hit them. And it's just a vicious cycle. Personally, that's what I think.
Yeah.
That's why when they say that, you know, post-traumatic disorders, it's a disorder because it's post-trauma. It now becomes a disorder, not just like an issue.
Right.
Because your brain...
I mean, I do know like a few people that have had traumatic experiences and that are fine. And I think in some instances it's like a mind of over matter.
Without therapy?
Without therapy.
But that's also, they had to have some sort of self-realization.
Yeah.
But
I feel like
were exposed to whatever trauma they were exposed to was not.
But I think in this case, like of the mother, obviously, like she had probably postpartum depression because the baby was so small, and
she probably didn't get any help.
Right? No, she didn't until she came here. But at the same time, I feel like if you were abandoned as a child, why would you want to abandon your child if you know what it's like growing up in that situation?
I don't know, because you don't know any better.
What do you mean? But you know what you do know, because you know what that situation is like.
We're just gonna go rogue today.
We are gonna. No, I feel like you know what that situation is like as a child. You were a child who grew up in a home where both parents sort of abandoned you. You were hopping like home to home between your grandma, your aunt, and then whoever else could take care of you. And you know how hard it was, and you know how traumatic it was for you, obviously, to be the type of adult that you are now. And then,
how did you realize that it's traumatic for you if this is your whole life and this is what you know?
Well, then you become an adult.
Right.
Now you're out of that situation because you're with somebody now. You're both working together. You have that support system.
The same type of person as her.
I guess, but then why have the child? If you're going to be like, we don't want to, but actually the dad didn't want to sign over the rights. That's the only reason the child was not put up for adoption. The dad was completely against it.
Right.
So he didn't want to give up the rights to the baby, because maybe the dad is the one, because he went through that situation, was the one that realized, like, you know, I don't want the same life for my child.
Right.
Because I feel like as parents, I think regardless of the situation, we always want better for our kids.
Sure.
Than anything like you yourself went through, or what things that you see out there, you want to do better for your kid. So I think, like, at what point
we have to what time period is this?
This is an older article.
You want better because it's always in your face. It's in your face on social media. You know, you're watching the TikToks, and it's, you know, bottles and models, and everything is just so glamorous.
Everybody wants to have a model and a bottle.
Everything is just so glamorous all the time.
Yeah.
So even from like a very young age, you're like, okay, well, this is cool, and this is like glamorous, and I want this, and I want that. But when we were growing up, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
We had, you know, the perfect TV families, like Full House. And that's what we wanted.
Right.
Our family. So if we didn't have that in our families, we had something to look up to and mimic. So that's why we would want better, because we didn't have that. If we didn't have that. Not we, but if we didn't have that, you had your TV perfect family.
Yeah.
And that's what you would want to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
But today it's not like that. So when did this happen? Maybe this was before TV time.
No, this was like in the 90s, I believe the article was released. But again, it's at any point there's always something. I mean, now, this wasn't now. Now, I don't think there's even any idealization about a family unit. You're like, oh, you don't need to have a family. You could just live your life and that's it.
Right.
That's really what it is. I mean, that's what it is. Everybody's like more independent, and
well, today the idea of family changed.
Yeah.
Because, you know, even in the 90s, it was mom, dad, brother, sister, dog, grandma, grandpa, like, and it was always packaged like that.
Yeah.
All these, even the shows that we grew up in, it was packaged very nicely.
Yeah.
And this is like the family.
With the white picket fence.
Today, this is not, these families, like, the typical families, there's lots of different
Yeah,
typical families.
of course. That's true. But I feel like now, even not even that the differences in families, I don't see much family style TV anymore. Like, regardless of what the family structure looks like.
Yeah.
It's more so, I see a lot more shows now focused on the independent woman versus, it's true, versus having a relationship and having a child. And a lot of people are steering away from the idea of children. And a lot of it does have to do with the cost of living. And that also stems from the push away from the idea of marriage and family, because you're now taking a home that would have 2 incomes to having 1. And realistically, as a single parent household, it's hard.
Right.
To financially sustain a whole family.
Right. Well, even like today's sitcoms that we used to grow up with, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
There's no replicas of them either. It's all very different today. My daughter watches this show, Jessie.
I don't know.
So it's like a little tiny replica of...
I'm in the Coco Melon stage right now. So I'm not up there yet.
Nanny?
Uh-huh.
Except there's no parents. So the nanny has these like 4 children or 5 children running around, and all these children are adopted children.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all like different races and different nationalities and backgrounds, and except one biological child.
Mm-hmm.
But the parents are never around. So it's always the nanny, the butler, and these children, and they're all creating like all sorts of situations. So, and this is family. And this is what our children are watching as family. And there's lots of shows like that. There's one that's like has some superpowers. Like each one of the kid has some sort of a superpower. My mom and dad have superpowers. So it's just very, very out there. Like, we don't have the wholesome or like, Full House type situations going on. Although in Full House there was no mom.
Right. Yeah.
There were 3 caregivers.
Yeah.
Male. And then the aunt came along later, but